and welcome to my live webinar on managing inflammation. As always, I'll give you guys a little bit of time to jump on because I know it takes a little bit of time for this to sort of load up and to show up into your notifications and for you to jump on board. So I'll allow a little bit of time just at the start before I get right into it. But to start with, for those of you who are on the live call, and for those of you who are listening later on to the recordings of this, welcome. Thanks for joining me. I am Dr. Brett Hill. Might not seem like it today. I'm in pretty casual attire today because it is my my off day, my day in the office, getting random odds and sods and jobs done, which is great. So yeah, it's warm here in Adelaide today, so I'm dressed quite casually, and I hope that's okay with you guys. But I'm a chiropractor. I'm here in my chiropractic practice, which is Healthy Choices Chiropractic in St Agnes in South Australia. Because I know there are some of you who are tuning into this from interstate, and I know there are some of you who are tuning into this from overseas. So welcome to all of you. I know for some of you, figuring out the time zone differences was a little bit challenging. I got a message from someone today, confused that I'd written on the event header that it was on the 3rd of March, but Facebook was telling them it was on the 2nd of March, because of course it is still the 2nd of March in the United States. So welcome to all of you, wherever you're coming from. As I said, I'm Dr. Brett Hill. I am a chiropractor, and so sometimes people sort of look at me funny because I do a lot of stuff in the health and wellness space. You know, I run a podcast called This Week in Wellness, and so if you want a 5-minute news update on what's happening in the latest research around the world in the health and wellness sphere and what I think about it, you can check that out. I've written a number of books on health and chiropractic and mindset and wellness. You can check all this out on my website, which is drbretthill.com. But I've written one book which is Nourish Without Nagging, How to Get Your Kids to Love Eating Healthily. And another book called Rock Bottom, which is much more about my sort of mental and physical journey through divorce and hitting rock bottom after that. So, and obviously a lot of stuff on my blog, drbretthill.com. And so I do talk a lot about things that many people perceive as not being chiropractic, right? People think about chiropractic and they think of sort of back pain, neck pain, headaches, and that's what we do. Whereas in reality, chiropractic has always been about more than that. You know, there's a textbook on, in fact, I've got it right here, I've been reading it. There's a textbook on chiropractic, and it's got some weird colours on the thing, but it's called The Chiropractic Textbook. It was like 1927 it was written, and it's amazing. And the author of that, Stevenson, said that chiropractic is a philosophy, science, and art of all things natural. So right from the start, chiropractic's always been about more than just back pain, neck pain, and headaches. It's about getting people healthy, and it's about understanding the role of the spine and the nervous system in controlling and regulating people's health, and beyond that, their performance. And understanding that stresses in our lives, be they physical, chemical, or emotional, can have negative impacts on that. And they can cause subluxations, and they can cause misalignments in your spine and interference to your body's natural expression of health. And so that's why in my practice, as I said, Healthy Choices Chiropractic in St Agnes, South Australia, we talk a lot about chiropractic and the spine and the nervous system, but we also talk a lot about lifestyle. And so we talk about mindset, we talk about movement, we talk about exercise. And these are all the things I'm going to be talking to you guys about today. So I can see that there are a number of you online now, which is awesome. I'd love you to come on and say hello, and let me know that you can hear me okay, and that this is all working. As you would know if you know me, I'm not the most technologically savvy person in the world, so it's always nice if you let me know that it's working and I can relax a little bit. I think the last couple of times I've done a live, it's ended up pausing halfway through and I had to restart for a variety of reasons. One of which was I didn't have my laptop plugged in and charging, which I do have this time, so that's all okay. Anyway, jump on, say hello, let me know you can hear me okay, that'd be great. But I'm going to talk today about inflammation. And the first thing I want to say about inflammation is I think inflammation affects way more people than we realise. Okay, I think in our modern society, with our modern lifestyles and our modern movement and our modern food and our modern stresses, I think it's probably safe to say that almost everybody suffers from inflammation to some degree. Now that doesn't need to be chronic debilitating inflammation, but what it means is that inflammation affects us in more ways than we realise. And so typically people think about inflammation and they think of aches and pains. They think of inflamed joints, hot, swollen areas of the body, and that can certainly be inflammation. And there can be a number of causes of that. So, what I want to say, I guess, right off the bat in terms of this is, none of what I'll be talking about today is specific medical advice, right? So I'm not your doctor. Although some of you I am your doctor. But for many of you, I'm not your doctor. And even if I am, then today is about the general rather than the specific, right? So I'm happy for you guys to ask any questions you have, and I'm more than happy to answer them absolutely as best as I can. But once again, I'm not your doctor. I'm not privy to all of your private medical information, nor do I want to be, certainly not at this stage. And so this is general advice that I'm hopeful will be really helpful for everybody, and confident that it will be. But it's not prescriptive in any way, shape or form. So just please bear that in mind as you go through today. But as I said, aches and pains, swollen joints, those are the common things people think of when they think about inflammation. But inflammation can cause a lot more systemic effects on the body, and a lot more subtle effects on the body. So you may not have any obvious symptoms of your inflammation, but it can still be impacting on your health, impacting on your performance, putting you at risk of potential problems later on and further down the track. We see the rise of chronic disease in our society, and we understand that a big part of that is inflammation over time causing problems. Right? So it can cause things like fatigue. It can cause things like insomnia. Right? These are not things we would traditionally collate with inflammation and think that inflammation might be playing a role in that. And it's important to remember that when we say inflammation is playing a role in that, is the thought around this, I guess, from a medical paradigm is that you have inflammation and then that causes a series of problems, right? I think from a wellness paradigm, what we really need to understand is that most likely inflammation is one symptom of the problem rather than being the cause of the problem, right? So the problem is ultimately our lifestyle, our environment, our stresses. Sure, there may be some genetic component to that. There may be some other components that come into that are outside of our control. But for a large degree, if we look at chronic disease in our society, what we see from the research is that the vast majority of it is lifestyle related, okay? And so what that means is that we have an opportunity to have a significant impact on these chronic diseases and have a significant impact on that inflammation if we deal with the cause, which is often, as I said, not necessarily the inflammation itself, it's actually the lifestyle that causes the inflammation. I hope this is making sense. Once again, if this is making sense, let me know. Put some chats in. I don't know if I'm just in the wrong spot here where I can't actually see, hang on, comments. That might help me out. If I go to here, maybe I'll be able to see comments. No, that didn't help. All right, I've got to come back. Dashboard, maybe that's where I need to be. Anyway, moving right along. There we go. I got heaps of comments. Jeepers. All right. I just need to be in the right spot. I told you I'm technologically savvy. All right. So far people saying I can hear me clearly. That's great. Watching in a caravan at the beach. That sounds awesome. We're going to talk about de-stressing later on. That sounds like a great way to do it. Lynn says, will you be recording this so I can watch a game when I'm not at work? Yeah, certainly my intention, Lynn, is for this to be recorded and to be posted into both my Healthy Lifestyle Choices Facebook group, which some of you may already be watching this in, and also posted onto my YouTube channel, which is Dr. Brett Hill. So all things working well, I will be doing that, and so stay tuned. Cool. And someone says, I have stage 4 breast cancer and have a lot of inflammation I need to get reduced. All right, Dawn, well, you stay tuned, because I'm going to give you some real practical tips that are going to help you with that, okay? But yeah, moving right along. So, other things that can be caused by inflammation, we're talking about like depression, anxiety, brain fog. We're really now starting to understand how inflammation of the brain, particularly when we start talking, there's a lot of research coming out around things like post-concussion syndrome and how that inflammation can affect the brain and link with things like, as I said, depression, anxiety, brain fog, and a whole lot more, Inflammation obviously plays a large role in a lot of gastrointestinal disorders and functional disorders, so things like constipation, diarrhea, reflux. Yes, I will. Sorry, Lynn has just asked me for a link to the Facebook group. That's a great point, Lynn. I should absolutely put that in here. So I'll do that right now. whilst we're going along. Thank you for that reminder. All right, great. So yeah, absolutely digestive issues, constipation, diarrhea, reflux, immunity. Inflammation can have a large impact on the function of your immune system and your ability to deal with stresses. Sorry, I'm trying to talk and grab this link at the same time, so just bear with me. Obviously, irritated skin is an obvious one, and I know a lot of parents, but also a lot of adults deal with irritated skin, and that can certainly have a big impact here. And there's definitely a lot of stuff we can do in terms of the lifestyle things I'm going to talk about that will really help with that. So I'm just going to grab this link. Here we go, and put this into the chat for you. For those of you who asked, there is the link to my Healthy Lifestyle Choices group. So please check that out and join in there. And that's the best spot to go, really, for any of the recordings of any of these lives that I do, but also to make sure that any future lives and live events and things like that I do, that you'll be the first to know about those. So yeah, make sure you grab hold of those. And then the final thing, neurological symptoms. So we kind of talked about that in terms of the brain and the gut, and we know that there's a huge neurological link between the brain and the gut. But we can also see even other neurological disorders. There's some fascinating research out there around things like, for example, multiple sclerosis. If you look at the work of Dr. Terry Wahls, she's amazing, and she is someone who is a medical doctor who was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, who deteriorated quite quickly to the point where she was wheelchair bound, and by changing her lifestyle and incorporating many of the strategies that I'm going to talk about today, was able to not cure, but start to, or it partially reverse her condition is probably an accurate way to describe it, to the point where from being wheelchair bound, she was able to get back to riding her bicycle, which is pretty phenomenal, when you think about it. And, I always say, I know Terry well, I've spoken to her a number of times, interviewed her a number of times, and she still has challenges, she still has multiple sclerosis. Things aren't perfect. However, they are infinitely better than they were. And if you check her out on YouTube, she did an amazing TED Talk, I think, which was kind of the start of her whole journey of, inspiring and helping others. But if you check her out on her YouTube, you can see some great videos there of both her recovery and also the research she's doing with other people with various different neurodegenerative disorders, and it's quite amazing. So check that out; it's really cool. So I'm going to give you, we're going to talk about 9 things today that you can do about inflammation, that you can do to help with your inflammation. And they're in a whole variety of different areas, right? So some of them are more physical, some of them are more mental, some of them are more chemical in terms of diet and lifestyle and that sort of stuff. So we're going to sort of go all the way around, okay? And the first one that I want to talk to you about will probably for some of you seem quite obscure, but it's a point where I often start when I'm working with clients, and it's a point where I often start when I'm doing presentations, because it is really ultimately the most important point. And that's getting really clear on your purpose. All right, and so once again, I know for some of you who are like, just tell me what to do about my inflammation, this will be kind of come across as a bit annoying and a bit obscure, and so I apologize, but I don't apologize, because it's really important. All right, but what I want you to understand is that there is a massive stress component in inflammation. We know there's a massive link between inflammation and stress. There's a massive link between your adrenal system and inflammation. And that when you are in stress, when you're in that fight or flight response, then you're much more prone to inflammation. And that if you can mitigate and manage that stress, if you can get more into gut growth and healing as opposed to fight or flight, and you're always kind of fluctuating between those two, and it's hard to be in either of those or both of those at the same time. You tend to be in one or the other. So if you can mitigate that and get yourself back into a period of sort of gut growth and healing, you can really help with your inflammation. So I think, understanding what your purpose is, what you're here for, and understanding that this doesn't have to be a lifetime thing, a lifetime sentence. It's just what your purpose is right now. It can change over time, and that's okay. But it's going to help give you some direction. It's also going to help give you some boundaries. All right? One of the best things about being clear on your purpose is it really helps you understand what you want to do and what you don't want to do. It makes choices easier. It reduces incongruence, right? And so often a lot of the stress we feel is when we're acting out of congruence with our purpose. When we're doing stuff that we really don't want to be doing, we really probably shouldn't be doing, with stuff we should be saying no to perhaps, and that causes a lot of stress in our lives, okay? And so this stress is really closely linked, as I said, to the inflammatory response in your body, which is really, the core of almost all of our chronic degenerative disorders that we're seeing that are rising all over the world at the moment. And so this incongruence leads you to be less productive and leads you to be procrastinating more, all of which are going to make it a lot harder for you to take any of the other steps that I'm going to talk about today. All right. So what I want for you, the easy thing to do in terms of a presentation like this is to motivate you to make change, right? And I say easy because it's easier, right? It's never easy to motivate someone to make change, but it's easier to motivate someone to make change for the short term, right? To get you to go away from this thinking, right, this is it, I'm ready, I'm going to make some changes. I've picked, 1, 2, or 3 things, and I encourage you to try and find 1, 2, or 3 things from this presentation today that you want to change, and change those, and you may change them for the next couple of weeks, and you may notice some changes as a result of that, but at some stage in the next couple of weeks, that motivation is going to start to wane, and it's going to be very easy to fall off the wagon and to lose any of those gains that you've made, right? So motivation can be the easiest thing after any sort of book you've read, presentation you've been to, live you've watched, event you've been to, whatever it is, podcast you've listened to, right? Motivation can be the easy bit. The harder thing, but the more important thing, is to get inspired, right? And so inspiration comes from your core purpose. When you can understand how you making these changes we're going to talk about can help you achieve your higher purpose, can help you achieve what you really, really want in life. And the more you can draw those links between your purpose and your actions, and reinforce those links between your purpose and your actions, perhaps with affirmations or however you choose to do that, then the more likely you are to succeed in the long term. And really, when we're talking about inflammation, we're talking about a chronic problem, okay? And for the most part, we're talking about a chronic problem. It can be acute inflammation, but most of what we're talking about in our modern society, and I imagine what most of you are interested in, is more so chronic inflammation, right? Because that's what tends to impact us over the long term. That's what leads to 80% of people in our society having some sort of chronic disease, is more these chronic conditions, okay? So the key then is to find inspiration, is to connect it there, so that you can create longer term results. So that's number 1. Right? 1 of 9 is purpose. I hope this is making sense so far. Let me know. Let me know if that made sense to you, or if you just found that really esoteric and annoying and you wanted just me to get to the practical nitty gritty of what you should actually do. But the second one is probably the most obvious one. I think any of us who've been suffering from inflammation have probably at some stage gone onto Google and done a search and said, what are the most anti-inflammatory foods, right? So I know that you probably have already done this. I know that you probably already know this. But regardless, I'm going to give you guys an opportunity or a little review here, all right? And so really, I mean, ultimately, the simplest way to think about anti-inflammatory foods, like fruits and vegetables, make sure you're getting enough fruits and vegetables, right? Now, I know that there's a lot of different schools of thought out there on this at the moment, and that some people are doing a vegan diet, perhaps, where they're getting lots of fruits and vegetables. Some people are doing a vegan diet where they're eating lots of processed crap and not actually getting fruits and vegetables, but that's a whole other story. Some people are doing a carnivore diet where they're not having any fruits and vegetables. And to be honest, I've looked into some of the science behind that, and I get it. If you're eating organ meats and nose to tail eating, which I think many people doing a carnivore diet are not, incidentally, it's theoretically possible to get the vast majority, if not all of your nutrients, and the vast majority, if not all of your anti-inflammatory requirements from doing a carnivore diet. And I know people who've done it and have reduced the inflammation in their body and have lost weight and have done all sorts of things. However, I also know vegans who seemingly do well on the vegan diet, right? However, I think we as humans are omnivores. We evolved as omnivores. I think the omnivorous diet is the right way for us to go, and I think there are plenty of benefits to fruits and vegetables. I think there are plenty of benefits to consuming animal foods, and we'll talk about some of those in a second. And so I think that fruits and vegetables are an important part of the diet. I think they should be included, and I think that some of the animal foods are some of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. And so whilst you can potentially get all of the nutrients you need by going one way or the other, especially if you're supplementing, I think the easiest way to do it is to eat an omnivorous diet. I'm sorry if that offends any of you, but that's how I feel. The next one in terms of anti-inflammatory foods is omega-3s. Now, omega-3s are really, really important. They're a really important anti-inflammatory, particularly the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, which in healthy animal products and meats can be really good, and in unhealthy grain-raised animal lots can be quite bad. And similarly, in some of our grains and things like that, those ratios can be quite bad, and particularly some of our processed oils, those ratios can be quite bad. So making sure you're getting enough omega-3s. Obviously, fish and seafood is a big source of that. However, also grass-fed animals, grass-fed meat, beef, lamb, and can be a really important source of that as well. So making sure, if you're really focusing on anti-inflammatory, making sure you are getting the grass-fed rather than the feedlot-fed animal products will make a really big difference there for you as well. Okay, grapes and berries are also fantastic anti-inflammatory foods. And once again, as I'm sure many of you are aware, garlic is a great anti-inflammatory food, so make sure you're getting lots of that in your diet. I personally love garlic. My poor wife, I do love garlic. I love roast garlic. The kids and I smash it whenever we do a roast, and we love it. Olive oil is fantastic. Ginger is fantastic. Turmeric is probably the one that has been getting the most press of late in terms of an anti-inflammatory food, and indeed an anti-inflammatory supplement. So by all means, I'm much more about doing it through food. I think the best way to de-stress your body is to getting that healthy food in, because the benefit of that is that you get lots of the healthy stuff in, but it also reduces your volume of unhealthy stuff that you're consuming, right? Whereas for some people, consuming lots of unhealthy inflammatory foods and then taking a supplement to try and counteract it can be a little bit counterintuitive. So I hope this is making sense. I'm trying to think, I've got a little notice here that tells me there's community standards. Okay, that's okay. I thought I was getting in trouble for breaching community standards for a sec. I think I'm doing okay. I haven't seen any chat from you guys for the last little bit, so hopefully you're still here. I can see that you are, and hopefully it's going okay. So that's our anti-inflammatory foods. The final one that's on here, I've got on here, is leafy greens. And so leafy greens, and to a lesser degree nuts, are a great source of magnesium. And magnesium is great anti-inflammatory nutrient, especially when it comes to your nervous system, and especially when it comes to your muscles. Magnesium is really important for relaxing both of those things. The one thing I will say about magnesium as well is that magnesium is an alkaline, and it's a good alkaline, but it's one that your body will use to neutralize acid. Okay. And so I see people all the time who are consuming lots of sugary foods, carby foods, coffee, alcohol, acidic diets, and they say, look, I'm eating lots of magnesium. I'm even taking a magnesium supplement, and it doesn't seem to be working. And the reason for that is your body's using the magnesium to neutralize the acid. It's not actually getting utilized by your body. All right, so this is once again where it comes back to having a holistic, healthy diet is really important in terms of getting the best results. All right, so make sure that you're getting a healthy diet that's not too acidic, that's not too processed, and then you get the best result of your magnesium. And you may find that you can get enough magnesium from your leafy greens and your nuts without having to go to the supplements as well. Or if you're living a high stress life, if you are really inflamed and trying to tone it down, you might still want to add in some magnesium as well. That's totally up to you. So that's our anti-inflammatory foods. Any questions about that? Any of those foods you've got questions about? Anything you think I've missed? What would you add in there? Let me know. All right, because then we're gonna move on to some inflammatory foods that we want to be aware of, and we want to make sure that we're minimizing as well. Okay. So inflammatory foods, and the one that's so prevalent in our society now is trans fats. And hopefully by now you've all heard of trans fats, and And the challenge with trans fats sometimes is that trans fats has about 1 million different names now. So if you are someone who's trying to monitor and be conscious of and aware of your trans fats, then really make sure you need to Google this now, because there's a whole list of things that companies will call trans fats now, right? So they will actually put a list out, they'll change the name on the ingredients list so that they can avoid you, as a smart consumer, putting their food back on the shelf because you see the name trans fats, right? So just be careful of that. But as a general rule, if we're avoiding margarine, right, we're avoiding deep fried foods, we're avoiding really processed foods, then we're going to greatly decrease the risk of having trans fats. The more we cook from home, the more we use healthy oils when we are doing our cooking, then the less risk we're going to have in terms of trans fats. All right, Dawn has asked me a question here. Which is better, salmon, shrimp, or other seafood? As a general rule, salmon is an excellent seafood, as long as it is wild-caught salmon as opposed to farmed salmon. You'll be amazed at what they do to some of those farmed salmon in terms of, once again, their feed, which can affect their omega-6 to omega-3 ratios, and also additives they put in there to make it pink and to colour it. It's kind of gross, right? So I would say wild-caught salmon would be fantastic. Shrimp, excellent as well. Once again, wild-caught shrimp is a fantastic nutrient as well. In terms of which one is more anti-inflammatory, I don't know if the research distinguishes that finely between those two. My gut feeling would be salmon. I'm a big fan of small line-caught fish. The general rule for me is I want a fish that is not farmed, that's wild caught, and I tend towards the fish that are on the smaller side, and that's mostly to do with their content of mercury. So obviously the small fish get a little bit of mercury, but then the bigger fish eat the small fish. They get they take in mercury from the environment and the mercury from all the fish they consume. The bigger fish eat those fish, and the further up your chain they go, the more mercury you end up with. So I think lean towards the smaller and lean towards the wild caught, and you'll be in pretty good shape there. Okay. Okay, good. This is making sense. All right, good, excellent. So trans fats, yes. Alcohol. Alcohol is another one we need to talk about in terms of inflammatory foods. There's a lot of research out there around alcohol, and there's a lot of bias in the research out there around alcohol. And so you need to be a little bit careful when people are saying, a quantity of alcohol that is healthy for you. Often what they're really saying, and often if you look more closely, what the research is really saying is that there is an ingredient in the alcohol that is good for you. And in this case, often resveratrol, which does have some really good anti-inflammatory properties. Now, the challenge with that is that you can get the resveratrol without having the alcohol. Okay, so you can have the grapes and you can get the benefits of the alcohol without the drawbacks of the alcohol, because alcohol can definitely make your body more acidic. Alcohol can make your body, tend your body into more of a stress response, which can tend it more towards an inflammatory response. All right, so I don't think alcohol is, the worst culprit by any stretch of the imagination here. But if you are really trying to reduce your inflammation and you have some serious inflammation going on, then you may want to consider reducing or even removing alcohol for a period of time and seeing how you go. And I think you might be surprised at how much that benefits you. You might also want to consider what alcohol you are consuming. As a general rule, on most of these sort of anti-inflammatory diets and things like that, they'll say, look, maybe try not having alcohol for a while, but if you do have to have alcohol, then some sort of a clear spirit with some sort of a soda water or something like that. Taking out all of the sugar from the alcohol can actually be a really good start to help you have less inflammation, because sugar can definitely be I don't actually have sugar on my list here. That's a massive oversight from me. But sugar is definitely a contributor to stress in your body and to inflammation in your body. So you want to be really careful of particularly refined processed sugars. So if you do have alcohol, try and have something that's really clean, something that has less sugar in it, and try and be mindful of how much you are consuming. You may even want to consider having gluten-free alcohol, right? So think about gluten, which is a couple further down on my list, is another component that can be really inflammatory for some people. In fact, I think for a lot of people. Alcohol is one to be mindful of. In the same vein, coffee is one to be mindful of. So I know that it's always a risk telling people that alcohol and coffee are things they might want to reconsider, because people love their alcohol and they love their coffee. And I've had large periods of my life where I've consumed neither. I know at one stage I went for 8 years of my life without any alcohol, without any coffee. Actually, I'm not sure I was 100% without coffee that entire period, but for the vast majority of that 8 years I was without coffee. I was definitely without alcohol. And I felt great, to be honest. And so I think for me, and once again, everyone's different. Like, I tend to be a poor coffee metabolizer, so I don't react as well to coffee as other people do. Other people react to it better. But for me, I do better without those two things. The only way to tell whether you do better without those two things is to remove them for a decent period of time. Because for most people, what you'll find is removing either of those things initially will be a somewhat negative experience, because your body is conditioned to those drugs. And so removing them can be quite challenging. So you need to do it for a period of time. You really, at least a month, probably even a couple of months, to really find out how you feel without those things, and to get a good gauge of that. The other factor that comes into this, of course, is the stress component, right? And so when we're talking about alcohol and coffee in our society, we're often talking about a very social component of our society, right? And so if you look to the blue zones in the world, the regions where people have that, where they have the most centenarians, places like Ikaria in Greece, what you see is that they do consume both alcohol and coffee, right? So that kind of flies in the face of everything I've just said. But they do it in moderation. They often water down their wine. So they drink in moderation. They consume consume coffee, I think, in moderation. I'm not even 100% sure how much coffee they consume. I just know that they do consume coffee. And so I think, but they balance that out by doing pretty much everything else on the list I'm going to talk about right as well, right? So perhaps they have a greater propensity, a greater threshold to which they can consume coffee and alcohol. Anyway, the point I was making is that I think the social component of their society is a really important factor. Some would say the most important factor in them having the highest rate of centenarians. That's just something to be mindful of and to consider, is that if it is an important thing for you from a social perspective, then you might want to find ways to do it better rather than eliminate it altogether. Okay. So I'm just reading some comments here. I find coffee aggravates anxiety, PTSD, and can cause me to have panic attacks. Yeah, absolutely. So and that's as simple as coffee puts you into, it excites your body, gets you into a state of essentially fight or flight. It's switching on that adrenal cortisol system in your body, putting you on hyper alert. Which once again, and for many of us who are already in a state of stress, in a state of fight or flight, then it just pushes it even further, right? So this is what I'm saying. If you are the Icarians and you are so far into that sort of gut growth and healing, you're not stressed at all, then you can get away with that. You can probably have a tolerance to a certain degree of coffee. If you are already dealing with stress, fear, and anxiety for a variety of other reasons, you mentioned PTSD there, then it's much more likely to tip you over the edge, and get you right into that fight or flight, that anxiety, as I said, the adrenaline, cortisol fueled system, and cause those problems you're talking about. So that makes a lot of sense. Dawn, mushroom coffee, I am not familiar with. So I'm always more than happy to say I don't know when I don't know, and I think that's really important for any professional to be able to say I don't know when I don't know. So I don't know about mushroom coffee. I'd love you to send me a link about it, because I'd love to know more about it. I think I have a feeling my wife could probably answer that, because she loves mushrooms. She's all about medicinal mushrooms, and I know what's his name? David Wolf talks about mushrooms a lot, and she's listened to some of that. So there you go. Renee says, I'm having a beer at the beach at the moment. Good on you, Renee. And once again, this is where it's, one of my favourite quotes from a chiropractic philosopher that was passed down to me was that, The universe isn't stranger than we think. The universe is stranger than we can think. And I think sometimes we try and simplify things too much. And this is the big problem with medicine. You know, if we want to try and make a double-blind, randomized control study to see whether alcohol is good for your health or not, right? All it looks at is whether you consumed alcohol or not. It doesn't look at how you consumed it. You know, there's a big difference between, I reckon, sitting at home, depressed and angry about your day and slugging back a beer to try and numb your senses, right? Versus sitting on the beach with a loved one, having a glass of champagne, celebrating, an anniversary, right? Like they're totally different in terms of how that's going to express in your body. So our body is much more holistic than that. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of tips and advice today, but your job is to figure out what works for you. Okay, your job is to is to incorporate the bits that work for you and leave the bits that don't. And you may find that, you know, sometime later, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years later, those bits that don't work for you right now, once you've worked on some other areas, they might work for you then as well. You know, it's constantly changing. So once again, I have coffee, I have alcohol. It'd be hypocritical for me to be here saying don't ever have either of those, but just be mindful of it. And if you're really trying to reduce your inflammation, I mean, if I was in a state of more of a crisis where I had chronic inflammation in my body and it was seriously negatively impacting on my health, I'm very confident I would not consume any of either of those two, right? But I'm not in that state at the moment, and I know that I do a lot of the other things right, and so I'm comfortable having some of each of those things at the moment. Does that make sense? All right, so let's have a look. Thoughts on decaf coffee? So yes, decaf coffee, really it depends on how it's done. So the traditional decaf coffee that you buy from most sort of stores is likely to be highly processed, and I think probably quite inflammatory. If you have I think it's called Swiss filtered, decaf coffee is a much more natural, colder, I think, way of doing it and processing the coffee. Far less likely to have negative consequences, far less likely to be inflammatory. So that's probably something to think about. Interesting. Carol says coffee causes her to fall asleep. It's so fascinating how it impacts different people in different ways. And I'd love to know, typically what you find for people, coffee causes them to fall asleep. It's that it causes that short-term spike in energy followed by a crash. It's a bit similar to like a sugar crash. You spike it up and you crash back down, right? Because at the end of the day, coffee can't create energy for your body, and this is what people don't get. Coffee can't create energy for your body. What coffee does is it causes you to use up your energy in a shorter period of time, right? So it puts you up, but eventually you're going to have to crash down, right? Because you've used up more of that energy, and then you're going to crash down. So I think that's probably what's happening with you, Carol. And obviously, people do this and they keep having the coffee and they stay up. And that's when eventually the crash becomes an even bigger crash. And that's like full-on adrenal fatigue and chronic fatigue and those sort of problems as well. So I think that's worth being really mindful of. All right, and then the final one is dairy. And dairy is really inflammatory for a lot of people, right? So, I just think human beings didn't evolve drinking the milk of another species, right? Like dairy, cow's milk is for baby cows. That's what it's designed for. Humans were designed to drink human milk up to a period of time, and then not really consume milk at all after that period of time, right? And so, I think there's probably a massive difference between, raw, unpasteurized dairy from healthy animals versus what you can get at your average store in terms of the amount of inflammation that creates. But I still think that probably for most people, we do better without dairy, and dairy can be quite inflammatory. I mean, I see it a lot in my practice with kids with inflammatory, sinuses and ears. And the number one thing we do for them is make sure their spine and nervous system is free from interference. Talk to them about eating dairy, number one, and then usually gluten, number two, and most of the time that makes a massive difference. And I think that's just one insight into the degree to which dairy can impact on inflammation. So Dawn says, the coffee, cordyceps and lion's mane coffee, unsweetened, sounds perfect, Dawn. Those are both great. There's some cool stuff out there around the benefits of those mushrooms. I'm not one who gets into superfoods a lot. Like, I just think, when you look around the world from an evolutionary perspective, what you see is that most of the hunter-gatherer societies around the world ate really simply, and actually had quite a restricted availability in terms of the variety of food that they had, right? So you look like there's one tribe in Papua New Guinea, 80% of their diet was sweet potatoes. You look at the Inuits, and the vast majority of their diet was fish and blubber, right? They didn't have the huge range. They didn't have the rainbow of food, right? They didn't have the huge range of food that we have available right now. What they did do is they had really good quality food and really simple diets, So I don't get too caught up with the cordyceps and the lion's mane and the, whatever the latest kind of superfood is, because I think, there's probably some benefits to those, and you can probably chase those around and around as they change every couple of months of what the latest superfood is. But I think most of the benefits we get are from doing the little things really well. And if you just think like the Papua New Guinean tribe, if you think like the Inuits, that you're just going to have, keep it simple, but have really good quality food, then I think you're probably going to do a lot right. So by all means, Dawn, I can go for your life with the mushroom coffees. Other people I know, they really go hard on the turmeric, and that works really well for them. Whatever that superfood is for you, you want to add in there, go for your life. But don't forget that it's not the panacea, right? That the most important thing is you do the simple things really well, and that the 99% of your diet is right, and then the 1% that you want to have as the superfoods or whatever, that's the added bonus rather than being the foundation. That's what I'd say about that. All right. The next point I want to talk about is controlling blood sugars. So I did have sugar, I just didn't have it I had it as its own standalone topic. I forgot about that, rather than having it added into the less anti-inflammatory foods. So number 4 is about controlling your blood sugars, because blood sugar regulation is really important in terms of managing inflammation. And so it's about understanding that we have a diet which is really high in simple carbohydrates, sugars, white foods. And what we see is a lot of people who struggle with sugar regulation. We see a lot of sugar spikes and crashes. We see a lot of people who are, in that chronic state of elevated sugar and then insulin response, leading to insulin sensitivity, leading to ultimately to diabetes. And so, a huge proportion of our population are in, at the very least, that pre-diabetic stage, if not moving right into the full-blown, type 2 diabetic stage as well. All right, so so I think that's really important, that we understand that we need to get back to a diet, not devoid of sugar. Once again, I'm not a keto dieter by any stretch of the imagination. I still have plenty of carbs in my diet, but I get those carbs from fruits and vegetables, and maybe a bit of honey, and from healthier sources, as opposed to added sugar, refined sugar. Processed grains, those sort of things. So I think that, the controlling your blood sugar is really about satiating yourself with really healthy foods that are lower on the sugar scale, lower on the glycemic index scale. So getting lots of healthy fats into your diet, getting lots of healthy proteins into your diet, and making sure that the sugars you do consume, you're getting good bang for your buck. You're getting highly nutrient dense fruits, vegetables, even things like honey, really nice natural raw honey that has lots of different nutrients in it, is going to be really beneficial for you. All right, so I think that's really important. Once again, I'm not a keto dieter, I'm not a low carber, although once again, if I was really suffering from a chronic inflammatory condition, I would probably be stricter on that than I currently am. I'd be tending more towards, I'd probably eat a low-carb diet by many people's definition of the word. It's not what I would define as a low-carb diet, because I think it's pretty balanced between fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. But compared to a standard Australian or standard American diet, that is definitely a low-carb diet, right? So, but I don't sort of think of it in that way. I just think of it as a natural, normal, human, evolutionary diet, right? But the real, what I would think of as a low-carb diet or even a keto diet, that's like really restricting down. And for many people with inflammatory conditions, that seems to work really well. So you can get some extra added benefits from that. Whether that's the way to go for the long term, or whether you should just do that for a time until things settle down and then go back to a bit more balance, I'd probably tend towards the latter. But once again, I have some great friends in the low carb. A good friend of mine, Jimmy Moore, who does the Living La Vida Low Carb podcast, and I talk to him on a regular basis. And he's a great guy, and he has some great knowledge and information. And I know he would definitely be an advocate of sticking to it and staying on that type of eating. So there are people who do it and do it well, but I tend to lean towards the more balanced, and particularly I think because I'm pretty physically active. So I do a lot of gym work. And play cricket and all those sort of, and want to be really active with my family and have a property in the hills that requires me to be pretty active. So I think that's why that balance really works for me as well. I think perhaps for people who have a more sedentary lifestyle, then there may be some benefit to going even more strict on that. Carol Hill says, I'm gluten intolerant and dairy intolerant, so I eat gluten-free diet with rice and soy milk, and I found that's best for me. Well, look, if that's working great for you, then by all means do it, Carol. I'm not a big fan of rice milk, purely because, once again, I'm always trying to find that balance between the healthy fats, healthy proteins, healthy carbs, and so the rice milk tends to be a lot higher in carbohydrates compared to some of the others. So I'm much more likely to go for an almond milk or more likely a coconut milk as opposed to a rice milk, because I don't want to get those sugars and I do want to manage my sugar levels, so you might want to consider that. And soy milk I generally don't recommend, especially for females, because of the phytoestrogenic properties of the soy and then how that can impact on your hormone balance and hormone regulation. So I don't do either of those two. I know people who do it and seemingly go okay. And like I said, if it's working for you, go for it. But you might want to try at some stage converting those to a almond milk, or perhaps even better a coconut milk, and see how you go. Some people are intolerant to coconuts, so everyone has to find their own. But anyway, that's what I'd be thinking there, Carol. All right, number 5 is exercise. Now, exercise is one of the best things you can do to reduce inflammation in your body. In fact, it's the way your body is designed to de-stress, and when you de-stress, you reduce your inflammation, right? So exercise is fantastic, but you can do too much, right? So the key here is finding what the right amount is for you. So when you move, right, your body sends messages back to your brain. It releases dopamine and serotonin in your brain, which is what allows your body to de-stress. It switches off that stress response in your body, and that switching off the stress response puts you back into gut growth and healing, tends to reduce the inflammation in your body as well, right? So this is where movement is really important. Now, we also know that of that feedback that goes back to your brain, 80% of that comes from your spine, right? So if your spine isn't functioning well, your nervous system is getting interfered with, your body actually doesn't have the same capability to de-stress as it does when your spine's functioning really well. So this is obviously one of the changes we see a lot as chiropractors, and one of the reasons we're so passionate about wellness-oriented chiropractic, not just doing it when you're in pain, but doing it all the time regardless, because that can be really beneficial in terms of decreasing that stress response and decreasing that inflammation. And then once, we as chiropractors, once we've got your spine moving, we want you to move it, because it's one thing to be able to move, but it's another thing to move it. So you need to make sure you're getting enough movement. And so, the classic sort of, 20 minutes of walking a day can be really beneficial in terms of making sure you're getting that movement. Maybe the 10,000 steps, that sort of thing. Yeah. Now, I think that for most people, they would benefit from doing a lot more than that in terms of their movement, in terms of both the quantity, but particularly in terms of the quality of their movement. I think often our medical recommendations around movement are too focused around walking and slow cardiovascular type exercise, and without recognizing the importance of lean muscle mass, without recognizing the importance of posture, the importance of stability that come from a greater variety of exercise and movement, and resistance exercise, which is also important for your bone density and for a whole variety of other reasons. So I think often we oversimplify it in terms of what people should be doing in an ideal world in terms of their movement. Hello, Jenny. How are you? Good to see you. So that's the point I would say. But then I would also, the flip side of that is, if you are someone who is in a state of stress, who is in a state of chronic inflammation, who is potentially in a state of adrenal fatigue, because those often sort of go hand in hand, then you do need to be careful about doing too much. And so it may be that even a 20-minute walk a day is too much for you at this stage. And it might be that a 5-minute walk is the appropriate amount for you right now, just to help tone down that stress response in your body, tone down that inflammation in your body. And then as your body becomes less stressed, then you have the capacity to gradually increase that over time, very slowly, and being very mindful and listening to your body of when you've gone too far and when you've not done enough, right? So that's the exercise. It's really important. You need to do some, but you need to not overdo it. You need to find that balance for you, and you need to remember that that balance will change over time, and that you will get greater capacity to expand on that, and it's really important that you do. All right, so that is the exercise. Point number 6 is stress management. So I've spoken so much about stress so far, because really the stress response is so closely linked to the inflammatory response. And so focusing on looking after yourself, and it's as simple as that, right? It is understanding that, I know that many of you on here are mothers, and the propensity of mothers is to put everyone else first, put themselves last, and in doing so, nobody benefits, right? Because you end up stressed and inflamed and fatigued and tired, and you're not able to give the best of yourself to anybody else, all right? So, when it comes to this stress and inflammation, it's really important that you put on your own face mask first. When you're in the plane and the mask drop down, they always tell you, put yours on first and then deal with the kids, because you need to be right so that you can look after everyone else, all right? So make sure you're making some time for yourself to do whatever it is that makes you less stressed. For me, it's probably doing exercise, it's probably playing cricket, it's probably going fishing, it's probably watching footy, right? For you, I'm guessing it's probably a bit different to that. And it might be, the stereotypical might be yoga and meditation and those sort of things. It might be going for a walk with friends. It might be, whatever your hobby is, whatever your sport is, whatever it is, you'll know better than me what it is that makes you feel less stressed. And it's about prioritizing and carving time out for that, and understanding that that's the best thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for everyone else around you as well. So I think, focusing on what you can control is really important, especially in our current climate. I mean, the media cycle is just mental at the moment, isn't it? I mean, things have just escalated, gotten out of control. There's so much fear and stress. I think removing yourself from a lot of that in terms of the media is a good idea. It is not consuming too much of that, spending more time on things that make you feel less stressed, and less time on things that are deliberately trying to make you stressed would be a really good idea. But also understanding that we can't control everything. There's with the situation in the Ukraine at the moment, and whilst there are some things we can do, we might be able to donate to a charity, we might be able to send some aid, we might be able to try and send a letter to our politician of what changes we'd like to see them making. But to a large degree, there's not a lot we can do about it, all right? And so understanding that, you can then just let that go and focus on the things that you can control that are going to have an impact on your stress and on your inflammation. Being present is really important, and many people will want you to do this through meditation, and if that works for you, that's great. But I don't think you need to do structured meditation to be present. And I think you can be present in anything. You can be present doing the dishes. You can be present with your kids. You can be present reading a book. You can be present mowing the lawn, right? Whatever it is that you're doing, you can be present in the task that you're doing right now, and that can become meditative. That can become de-stressing, all right? So just don't let other people's expectations of how you should de-stress and how you should be present dictate whether you're doing it or not. Just do it in the way that works for you. Getting out into nature, movement, as I've said before, even doing it with animals. These are things that can really help de-stress your body. Switch off that stress response, reduce that inflammatory response. So these are things you might want to consider. And then the other one is journaling. And you can do this in a whole bunch of different ways. My favorite way to journal is to write down 3 things I'm grateful for, 3 things that I love about myself, and 3 things that I'm planning on doing moving forwards, right? So I call that the gap. I talked about that in my latest book. Gratitude, acknowledgement, plan, right? Gratitude for what's already happened, acknowledgement for yourself and what you've done well, which so many of us don't do so well, and then planning ahead of what we can do moving forwards. So just journaling simply like that, or even just writing down your thoughts, getting them out of your head. All right. It is a great way to go about it. All right. Sleep. All right. So making sure you're getting enough sleep. Lack of sleep is a chronic problem in our modern society. A lot of this has to do with our stress cycles and our cortisol cycles. So we need to make sure that we're getting that right. And the way to get this right is, one, getting sun on your face or on your body early in the morning, right? So when you get up, pull up the blinds, make sure you're getting some sun, some direct sun to start your cycle, to start that cycle off, okay? That's going to start your, because what you should have is a spike of cortisol in the morning, and then it gradually decreases as the day goes on, right? So you do that. You exercise during the day, okay, which helps you. You try not to try to do all those de-stressing strategies as much as you can during the day. You then try not to eat too late at night. You try not to be on your screens too late at night. You make sure your room is nice and dark, black out as much light as you can, so that you're not interfering with that cortisol coming down as you get through the day. You know, don't eat too many stimulating foods late in the day. You know, sugars, carbohydrates, spicy stuff, alcohol, coffee. You know, don't have that too late in the day, because you want to be winding down and switching off. And then put the screens away for at least the last hour before you head to bed, so you can really wind down, switch off, get a great night's sleep. You know, make sure you allow enough time for you to get your 8 hours or whatever, you know, 7, 6, 10, whatever that is for you. Get enough sleep each night, because that's really important. Point number 8 I've got here is self-care. Once again, this is going to look different for everybody. For some people, self-care is going and getting a massage or getting your nails done. For some people, it's a routine they do at home with their essential oils. Or, you know, my best friend Kim Morrison has some wonderful routines for this. If you check her out, and her 28 range of essential oils, I know my wife absolutely loves and uses on a regular basis. So, you know, you can find those sort of self-care routines that work for you. For me, often it's just about getting some me time and some quiet time, you know. And so if I can have half an hour just to sit by myself and chill, and I might be just, you know, messing around on my phone, I might be reading a book, I might be watching a little bit of sport. It's just about having that little bit of time. That's my self-care. I'm quite introverted, and the nature of what I do, you know, I'm like an introvert by nature and an extrovert by choice. So, as you know, in order to fulfill my life purpose in terms of helping people, then I need to express that extroverted side, whether that be in practice, on my podcast, doing lives like this, you know, speaking on stage to 1,000 people, doing, you know, intensive weekend retreats. You know, I do those things and I love doing those things, and I need to recharge after, because my introvert in me is like, oh, I just need some time to myself and just to hide away in my little cave now and recharge. And so that's what I do. And I'm fortunate that my wife Stephanie understands that, and is pretty good nowadays at knowing that I need my me time to recharge, or else if I don't get it, once again, you know, I'm then pouring from an empty cup. And that doesn't really help anyone. So make sure you're getting your self-care, whatever that looks like to you. Number 9, look after your gut health. Okay, we now know the intricate link between your gut health and your brain health, and the impact of your gut on your immune system. We know that your gut, you know, you have more non-human cells in your body than you have human cells in your body. You know, the gut and the probiotics and the bacteria that exist within your gut are vitally important for your health. And when the balance of those is good, then everything else tends to go well. When the balance of that is poor, then everything else tends to go poor. In particular, if you're not looking after your gut lining, then that's going to be, you get leaky gut, that's going to be letting stuff through into your body that shouldn't be getting through into your body, that your body is going to mount an immune response to, which is going to be an inflammatory response to, okay? And so this is why the gut is really important. So making sure we're looking after our gut microbiome with things like supplements, sauerkraut, kombucha, and kimchi. Once again, I'm a favour of the food-based alternative, so I'm big on getting some sauerkraut whenever I get a chance, you know, having some kimchi if I get a chance, and having some kombucha on a regular basis, to make sure I'm getting some of those probiotics in. I'm also really big on not killing off the probiotics I've got, right? So I avoid antibiotics, I avoid chlorinated water, I try not to have too much alcohol, I try not to stress too much, right? All of these things that are going to kill off your gut bacteria. And then I make sure I'm doing stuff that looks after my gut lining, and that's really making sure I get some healthy collagen in. And the best way we find to do that is with bone broth, and so we'll make a bone broth at home and have some of that. We'll also have gelatin. We'll use that in like gelatin gummies we make at home for myself and for the kids, and make sure we're getting that looking after that gut lining as well. All right. And then the final thing, of course, being a chiropractor, is looking after the health of your spine and nervous system. I've already said how making sure that your spine is sending the right messages back to your brain to release that dopamine and serotonin is crucially important in terms of helping your body de-stress and helping your body reduce inflammation. But that's only one small part of the picture, right? Because when we talk about this chiropractic, we're talking about the spine, and we're talking about the impact that has on the nervous system, and that's only one tiny part of the nervous system, right? We can then talk about the nerves that go and control your gut, the nerves that go and control, your immune response, right? All the nerves that go and affect your brain, right? All these other nerves that, if they're getting interfered with, can affect your body in a huge variety of ways, many of which can be linked to inflammation. All right, so if you are, obviously, if you're in my area, you can come see us at Healthy Choices Chiropractic. You can check out our website, healthychoiceschiropractic.com.au. You can even book an appointment in online. If you're not in my area and you want some help finding a great chiropractor near you, then jump into my Healthy Lifestyle Choices group. And I noticed that a couple of you have already done that, so thank you. I will jump on that in a second and make sure that I accept you in. Make sure you answer the questions. But I'll jump in there and let you into that group. Ask the question in there and I'll make sure I find you a great chiropractor close to where you are. In the meantime, check out healthychoiceschiropractic.com.au. If you haven't joined the Healthy Lifestyle Choices group yet, I strongly encourage you to do it, because I'll put the recording of this up in there. But I will also, that is also where you'll find out about future lives that I'm doing, future events that I'm doing. This week's podcast generally gets shared into there. If I'm being good, I try and be organised and do that. But it's kind of the hub for everything that I'm doing in the health and wellness world. So jump in there, check it out, join the tribe. It's a really nice, safe community. You can ask any question you like in there. I jump in on there on a regular basis, most days, to answer any questions people have got and to try and help people as best I can. And then also you can join my YouTube channel. So youtube.com/Dr. Brett Hill, I think. And you can, and I will post this video up there as well as any future videos. So thanks for joining me today, guys. If any of you have got further questions at this stage, now's the time. Ask now or forever hold your peace. No, that's not true. If you don't ask now, you can jump into the Healthy Lifestyle Choices group and ask later. But I'd love it if you ask now. Happy to stay for a little while and answer any questions you've got. Otherwise, I'm happy to love you and leave you and see you guys soon. For those of you who are in Adelaide, I should also mention we have got an event coming up soon. I'll just double check the date. I think it is the 17th of March. Which is going to be a low tox living event, and so I'll be talking all about how to manage a lifestyle that is low tox and how that affects the way you look after your health and your family, and what foods you buy and what chemicals you use at home, and all of those sort of things. So I'll be talking about that. I've had a couple of people ask me, and I want you to tell you, it is not in any way linked or involved or promoting any sort of multi-level marketing. As I said, I love essential oils, I love all of those things, and I know that many of the people who come to that talk will be from a variety of different companies in that regard, and I'm totally okay with that. I just don't do it, and I don't promote it, I just want to let you know. That's not what it's about. It's not, you're not coming along for me to sell you stuff. It's just about me giving you information. Renee said, what about diverticulitis? So, honestly, Renee, diverticulitis, it's an inflammatory condition. Everything I've mentioned today is going to help with that. All right. Now, once again, there's a time and a place for medical interventions. Once you get to that stage with diverticulitis, sometimes that is required. My experience is, for the most part, if you can do these simple things really, really well, you can have a massive impact on something like diverticulitis. Definitely gluten and dairy, I'd be cutting them out if you haven't done that already. Cut them out and see how you go. And those would be the two, and get a chiropractor, get checked. Those would be the things I'd say first. to make sure everything's functioning well. But really, all of the tips I've given you today are going to be beneficial there. Carol says, I wouldn't be walking today without my chiropractor. I'm over 70 with osteo and psoriatic arthritis. That's amazing. Well done, Carol. What a great chiropractor. That's not a family member, by the way, just in case you're wondering. Monique says, great to hear from over. I essentially know we get lost in the busy day-to-day. Yeah, absolutely, Monique. And I'm sure that's the case for many people on this call today, that it's more about reminding you of what you already know. And I think that's the case in health in general. You know, we underestimate how amazing our bodies are, and how incredible the innate intelligence of our body is to tell us what we should do and how we should do it. And often it is less about doing things better and more about just removing interference and letting your body heal itself. And I think that's probably the common theme that comes through in all the stuff we've spoken about today. So yeah, absolutely, Monique. It's a great reminder. And you know, one of the beauties of doing stuff like this for me is it's a great reminder for me. You know, it helps reinforce to me why I do what I do, and it helps to remind me of things where maybe I've fallen off the wagon a little bit of recent times and think, oh yeah, I could do that better, and you know, and reconnects me to my purpose, and helps me be inspired to do that better rather than try and motivate myself to do that better. So, thank you, Monique. All right, I think that might be it. Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure having you all on board. Thanks for the great questions and comments. You've been a great interactive tribe, which has been an absolute joy. As I said, I will endeavour to get this recording up on my YouTube channel and in the Healthy Lifestyle Choices group. If it's not already there, I think I said it to share there already, but if it's not already there, I'll make sure it is there. And I'll put a link in there to the YouTube video once it's up on YouTube as well, which kind of makes it easy to share. If you've got someone in your life who you want to share it with, I encourage you to do that as well. So thank you, guys. Have a great day. I'll see you guys in the near future on my next live, whatever the topic for that may be. If you have something you particularly want me to talk about, then by all means, once again, jump into the Healthy Lifestyle Choices group and let me know what you think would be a great topic you'd love for me to speak on in a future live. Thanks, guys.